So that talk you did with Carlo McCormick,
Yes.
you said something like, if I actually discussed what went into coming up with my language, you would think I'm completely insane.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if you can kind of go into a little bit of detail about why we would think you're insane if you
Right.
talked about it.
Okay. Well, the first reason you would think I'm insane is because I am insane.
No,
Um,
not really.
but no, I mean, first of all, I did an interview on YouTube with the cultural and art critic and Lower East Side historian Carlo McCormick, where we covered a lot of ground. I've known Carlo since the 80s when I was out and about as a club kid in the New York scene, and he worked at Palladium and other clubs. But he's a deep thinker also, understands my music very deeply, and I just don't. My development was different than a lot of people's development. I had a lot of very bizarre mentors and teachers growing up, and there are people that a lot of people, if you ran into them in the course of your life, you probably would not listen to, like a strange guy that worked at a gas station who just knew a lot of stuff, a janitor that I knew who was just a philosopher himself. People like a homeless person I knew who just was kind of psychic and just knew all kinds of things. So I actually listened to a lot of people that people would consider crackpots, and they saw something in me, and encouraged it. And it's not the type of advice you listen to if you want to kind of become a lawyer or a doctor and go into just a regular life. I mean, I definitely
It would probably be anti-productive and
yeah, exactly. I mean, so I think when I made that statement that I just listened, I had a lot of mentors that most people would advise their kids to stay away from.
Okay.
And I took to heart a lot of the lessons that they instilled in me, and even my music teachers were not. I studied with Clifford Brown's teacher and with Dennis, and also Robert Boise Lowry was his name, and with John Coltrane's teacher Dennis Sandoli, and especially Sandoli. He's not the average usual person. It's just, I mean, even like some people that if their kids were going to school for composition, they might know Dennis's resume, but if they met him, they might be like, I don't know about this, just because his whole procedure and way of going about things is just very different.
Sure.
So, and then my whole reading schedule and was kind of off the beaten path, and just the assumptions that I made and actually based my life on were things that if your kids made those assumptions and based their lives on, you would probably become an alcoholic worrying about their future. So I there's a lot of things, that thought processes that went into me being able to be who I am and do what I do, that if I had kids and they went that way, I would advise them to go opposite way.
Fair enough.
Okay, so that's kind of what I was, without getting into particulars.
Okay,
That's what I was getting into.
Okay, I get what you're saying. Well, you brought up Dennis Sandoli. I mean, does he still? Okay, is there any aspect of your life now, whether it comes to practice on the piano or just whatever, where you still feel like there's things you think about that he told you, or like particular lessons? I mean,
Yeah. Dennis is, when if you have somebody that you designate as kind of a guru,
yeah,
they always stick with you and they're always in the back of your mind. And Dennis Sandoli to me is kind of my guru in some ways. He's always there. Some image of him, or because his mind was very infinite in a certain way. I mean, what he projected musically um, uh, points to infinity in a way, and there's a way that he organically kind of enters your nervous system as a guru or as a teacher, and you're always in some ways, even though his gift as a teacher is to push you to be yourself, he's ingratiated his way into your system in a way. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that he
kind of like read who you
yeah,
are.
well, he inspired you to be yourself, but he's there smiling. You feel that nurturing presence of his guruship there in the back of your mind, and in a way, he lives on in his students, but without an overbearing presence. So, as Bruce Lee once said, any great teacher makes you realize how unnecessary they are. That's not the exact quote. And unnecessary is not the actual word, but yeah, their goal is to get you to reject them, but there's a love in that is displayed between the pupil and the student that's really deep. And Dennis is both deep in the fact that he had a approach and a literature that he gave his students to work on that it is his, but the goal was to point to you in a way, and it was just very deep how he did that, and there was there was nothing dogmatic about it.
Right. I mean, and are there any particular, like, I don't know, like lessons that he taught you? I mean, like literal musical lessons, like a lesson plan or something that you still think help you, like today, like when you go to practice every day.
Well, he had an approach to working on different things that all the students had to abide by, and it was a discipline. But but once you go through that, I think the idea is to develop your own practice routines. But he's always there. I mean, he's always you always feel his nurturing presence of sorts. Okay. And the literal. It's to get into literal kind of whether it's a music lesson or a way to practice. I don't know what good that would do, because you can have two people can practice the same things and have completely different results. Right. Also.
Gotcha.
So Dennis is in the background as he had a very, don't get me wrong, this lessons with him were not woo-woo. Right. They were specific, and they he expected you to work on certain things and come in and show him.
Gotcha.
But the underlying message after all that was something else.
Right. Okay, I get what you're saying. I hadn't thought of this until now, but did you ever take a lesson from Tristano?
No, I was planning on.
Okay, yeah, I never put that together.
Right. No, I was planning on. I was talking to people that I knew somebody that had studied with him and was close to him, and I was planning on, and then he died.
Oh, okay, yeah, I wasn't sure the timeline.
So
he died when, in like the early 90s or?
What was it? The early, around 79, 80. I don't remember.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah, but it was somewhere around either the early 80s or late 70s. I don't remember. Okay. To the best of my memory now, I'm getting older and I sometimes forget things. But that's I kind of think that was around, and I was going to study with him or Sal Mosca.
Yeah.
And then I remember my friend who was supposed to get me in touch with him. I ran into him, what's up with Lenny, and he's dead.
Oh wow. Okay. Gotcha.
So that was that, and then with Sal Mosco, I went the Sandoli route.
Yeah.
And because it would have been a choice between one route or the other at the time, and then once I started with Dennis, he was like my guru. So yeah. I didn't want to, since I had and I knew what I was learning with Dennis, even if I only studied with him for a few years, I knew that was setting a direction for the rest of my life. Mm. So it wasn't. I didn't really want to have another teacher that I looked up to in that sense. And I have with Sal Mosco, I have too much of a love for his playing to want to then go, because I Dennis was the kind of the guru principle.
Yeah.
And I just didn't want to have another one because I didn't think and also, I mean, I love Sal Mosca's playing, but I don't really know his record as a teacher. I mean, the one thing with that I would say, if a teacher has students that sound like him, that's a bad sign. And I don't know. I mean, I don't,
Right.
you know, I don't know, but I love his playing.
Oh my
I mean,
God, it's so amazing.
yeah,
He's like the most underrated pianist. Like,
he's the most underrated pianist ever. He is
Yeah,
an
it's-
absolute, like, stunning genius of the piano.
yeah. Do you have a favorite recording that you think encapsulates?
Yeah, I do actually. I really love, and I haven't heard it for years, and I'm trying to re-get it. The solo piano album he did on, what's it, Interplay Records? It's called Sal Mosca's Music,
Okay.
and it went out of print, and then it was reissued on a Japanese, and you can label, and you can sometimes find CD copies that are like almost $80, $90 or $60.
Right.
But even that's hard to find now, and I sold my LP to a friend of mine years ago, and I'm trying to get him to find it and make a CDR for me, so I have it, but because I can't play the LP, I don't have the turntable any longer.
Sure.
But that's I mean, I really like his playing on those live at, I forgot what they're called, but the Village, they were recorded with Warren Marsh. Yeah, those are stunning.
Crazy.
They're stunning, and
a concert, is that another? Do you like that one?
yeah, I like that a lot. You know what's funny about that? I was in Tower Records once, and Anthony Braxton walked in the store, and we just started talking, and I told him, we started talking about his love for Warren Marsh and the Conants.
Yeah.
And then I started telling him how much I love Sal, and he went crazy. He's like, "Do you know it? That album?" So he ran and bought it for me.
Oh, wow.
Like, he just like, "You got to hear this," and
That's
he ran
amazing.
over, got it out the bin, and actually bought it and gave it to me.
That's really cool.
I know.
Yeah,
So,
you two are like the biggest Sal Mosca lovers, like ever. It seems like.
So yeah, it's a great album. There's something about the the Sal Mosca music album that
I'm not sure if I know
slightly like is so home based to me.
I got you. Does he play "There'll Never Be Another You" on that? Is it that?
Now
album?
there's another album he does that on.
Okay,
I
don't
can't
remember which ones.
I can't. I mean, no, if I remember correctly, because it's been so many years since I heard it, it might be all originals, but I don't.
Okay.
Yeah.
Whatever. Yeah, it's okay.
Right.
Okay, cool. So, well, yeah. So, that's what I was going to ask you. So, how did your Sandoli guruship affect? Because you were taking lessons with Rand.
No, then I went to New England Conservatory after.
So like when you were studying with Rand Blake, were you kind of like?
Well, okay. I mean, first of all, I really love Rand's playing.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan, and I actually listened to something the other day. I was listening to something that's not out yet, that's coming out, a solo piano thing of mine, and I actually never really heard some Rand Blake influence on me, but in one cut, I heard a slight bit, a small bit of it. And there's a kind of a bizarre kind of world out there, if you can imagine, like where Rand Blake and Mal Waldron kind of the sound intersects.
That makes a lot. Well, I feel like the way that he kind of like milks the overtones out of the piano, Rand Blake.
Right.
I mean, you do that to an extreme extent.
Right.
And they're like a really beautiful.
So I met Rand. I played some compositions of mine for him, and he, liked what I was doing and wanted me to go to New England. He.
Okay. Yeah.
So I decided, because I didn't feel ready to move to New York yet. I didn't think I was quite there, and I wanted to get out of Wilmington, Delaware, and get like at least ready to come to New York. So I just decided to go to Boston, and I went to New England, and I like, again, Rand's like Sal. I really love what he does.
Yeah.
I think he's an extremely valuable part of the history of all this.
Yeah.
But I already kind of had my guru.
Gotcha.
And so, I was at New England. It was cool. I really felt a need to kind of be in the midst of the New England vibe before moving to New York, because it's such a part of the history of everything. I mean, with Gunther Schuller up, there's a lot of really, important music teachers that kind of were in Boston or went through Boston. And then a lot of players, Jackie Byard had been up there. Cecil Taylor went to Boston before moving to New York, or moving back to New York because he was from here.
Right.
But so that continuum, when you look at the East Coast continuum, I always look at people moving from the South up to New York or to Philly even before they moved to New York, and then obviously like Coltrane. You think of people like Dizzy, and then you think of people that move from the Midwest or the West to New York. So I mean a lot of some of the bebop people, and then you think in terms of the whole Philadelphia continuum, which being from Wilmington, Delaware, which I am, that's a subset of. I mean, Wilmington is its own thing. Clifford Brown came from there, but in another way, it's a subset of the Philly scene. And then you think of people moving to Boston, and then you think of everything immigrating to New York.
Yeah.
And I wanted to, really feel the whole sweep of all of that. So, just having been from Wilmington and been around the Philadelphia vibration, wanting to move to New York, but then wanting to kind of feel within the East Coast continuum, the Boston aspect of that. I did want to be in Boston for at least a year or something. And when I went, I had my own approach already really coming into fruition. And it was a kind of a point where I didn't really feel the need to really study with any. I mean, I already had my own path. I mean, I'm always studying. But it's a self-study, and it's just imbibing what's ever out there into my central nervous system. But when I got to Boston was a really socially awkward year for me too. I
get what you're saying.
Yeah, I had trouble getting laid in Boston.
That's
yeah. Okay, it was just like
your personality is more suited towards New York.
Oh no! When I moved to New York, right away, the first day I was at home, it was just like I came here. It was like, oh my God, it was heaven, and it was just I fit right into the social scene. Right like the first day I was here, I was hanging out at clubs and stuff, and I had no problems with women, and it was just like heaven's just open.
Right.
But that was not the case in Boston. and also I mean I don't know, it might have been such not the case because I was just so possessed with the practicing and the stuff too. I might have been even oblivious to like.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Do you think that was the period in your life where you practiced most when you were up there?
No, well, I was practicing all the time, but when I practiced most was before. Probably when I was there was a period before I studied even with jazz teachers I mentioned. Yeah. Where I was just really studying classical music. Where I mean when I was like, especially in the summer in high school when I wasn't in school. Yeah. And I practiced all day, every day.
Right.
I remember a neighbor of mine even said to me once, because I mean, we were thick walls, but he could hear a little. Right. And he said he saw me walking outdoors, and he walked up to me and he goes, "Even Oscar Peterson took breaks." That's right. I was actually astonished that he knew who Oscar Peterson was.
Yeah, that's surprising, right? That's cool. Well, okay, so speaking of practice, I mean, you don't have a piano. You practice every day, pretty much, right?
I try to every day. Yes.
So what? I don't know if you said this, but I think you did. You said something about how I assume now at this point in your life you're much more efficient in your practice.
Oh, I'm extremely. Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, what's the goal? I mean, not the goal. What's the journey been to getting more done in a smaller period of time? Like, let me make sure this is still going. Okay, yeah, we're good. Yeah, so like, I mean, how do you feel like you've gotten?
You learn how to practice. I mean, over the years, you really learn how to hone into. I mean, I'm a big boxing fan. It's the same in boxing. Like, if you've been doing it for years, your muscle memory is such that you can act like what you take somebody else maybe a year to learn, you might be able to learn it in 30 seconds.
Yeah. Right.
And then you've forgotten more than most people have learned. So there's a whole different set of muscle memory and stuff working. And then there's just intelligence as far as being able to channel how to go about learning stuff, so you just know how to really focus in on what's needed to be done. And
Right.
whereas somebody at an earlier stage is flailing away or learning, you get to the point where you just know exactly what you need to do to kind of download new information from the cosmos, if you want to call it.
Okay.
And so your practicing just becomes massively efficient,
Right.
because you just know exactly what to do to, bam, bam, bam.
Mhm.
So both the intelligence behind the practice, and then the muscle memory that you've occurred from a whole lifetime of discipline kick in, and you just really can get more done in a lot less time than somebody flailing away learning. And I don't flailing away, it's not the right, because if they're actually learning, they're learning. I mean, it's
Right.
but they're learning how to learn.
So it's kind of more of a matter of like finding the things that, for whatever reason, seem to allow you to just like
Well,
get in the
yes.
whatever you
Yeah, and that's the other thing, that there's a
want.
personalized
Right.
set of practice techniques, material that you're attuned to, that you get right to the meat of it
Yeah.
right away. I mean, that's another aspect of it. Yes.
Okay. And then could you maybe give a couple examples? Like, what are maybe some things that you've practiced like for decades that allow you to just keep going deeper and deeper into the areas you want to get deeper into, I guess?
Well, I mean, I don't. I guess.
I mean, on one level, I guess it doesn't matter because
When I was young, I wrote a letter to Cecil Taylor asking him. He never answered it. I wrote it it was the address on the back of one of his records to the record company. So I wrote him a letter, and I asked him. And then, I remember reading an article with him in Keyboard Magazine where he said to talk about, like, I don't remember the exact quote, but he talked about music being a set of symbols of a culture. So except for talking about like exact musical things, you might as well talk about how people walk down the street, how they talk. So I mean, I have a set of things I do that are specific to me, that work for me. When I was younger, every musician I met, my first question to them was what was their practice routine? How did they practice? And I mean, everybody say, I think there was, in Wilmington, Delaware, there was probably, oh yeah, if you meet Matt, he's going to ask you what your practice routine is, and he's going to have a notebook and
Wow.
Yeah. So, but I have things that work really well for me. If somebody else tries them, they might not work for them, or they might be able to get abstractions from them that work well within their nomenclature and things to do. As you know about that. I did ask Cecil Taylor once. I asked him about it, and he just like, why, like, why are you asking me this? But I actually went through a process of, when I was younger, of listening to him and trying to imagine how he practiced based on the information I was taking in from his records. And I think I actually kind of got some type of abstraction of that, whether it lines exactly with what he did in his practice routine, I don't know. But I'm sure, okay, if I'm listening to the notes and trying to get some type of psychic one-to-one correspondence between what I'm hearing and how you would have to practice to get to that, even if I was not accurate about all of it, I'm sure I probably hit on some things, and I actually think I know kind of exactly how he practiced to some extent. He also, like, I know people that roomed with him and or were in a rooming situation within a tour.
Oh yeah.
And there was a piano there, so they heard him practice. So, I got, But anyway, all that's, doesn't. I mean, I talked to people that had studied with Lenny Tristano, and got, even though I never studied with him, they took me through his whole teaching method.
Right.
And I knew their practice routine, and I knew what he told them to practice. And I got kind of a map in my mind of that. I have a map in my mind of what a lot of people did.
Okay.
And if I would find something that I thought would work for me within that, I would adopt it to some point, maybe color it in my own way, or find my own adaptation to it.
Right.
There used to be a pianist in Wilmington. He committed suicide, and people told me never not to study with him. I was like maybe 15 or 16 at the time. Everybody was telling me he was like crazy. Don't study with. Don't go over his apartment. Even he had like loads of ability. Now thinking back, I don't know if he aesthetically had anything. I was really young then. I was impressed with anybody that could kind of play the instrument well.
Yeah.
My remembrance of his style was that it was somewhere between Chick Corea and McCoy Tyner, but just really florid with a lot of maybe not the best aspects of their style. Okay. But anyway, the thing is, like, he was really technically extremely, impressive in a way that would impress a 15-year-old kid. Okay, trying to learn the instrument. Whether you would go home and emotionally get anything out of an album because or not, I don't remember what. But anyway, I remember actually asking. I took people's advice, never studied with him, and never went over his apartment.
Okay, gotcha.
But I did talk to him in public a couple of times, and I actually asked him and he told me his practice technique. He said, or his routine, and if I remember correctly, it was an hour of scales, an hour of Sliminski's book, an hour of Hannon piano, an hour of Czerny. Then he would play like an hour of scales that were modes, not not diets, not regular major and minor scales. Then he would do like work on a jazz tune for an hour. Then he would play just repertoire of tunes he knew for an hour. Then he would just play. He would play exercises from Boise. It was Clifford Brown's who lived in Wilmington that he used to have because he had studied with him for an hour, and then he would just play for a half hour anything, and then he would sight read for an hour. Then he would do Beethoven sonatas for 2 hours. That was
the fuck.
So I actually for like a few weeks actually tried his routine. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that makes me think of, do you know Ben Monder, the
yes.
guitar player? Yeah.
I don't know him personally.
Right. I just remember him saying, like, I always wanted in my life at some point for just to practice for 24 hours straight without getting up from the guitar. And I would always fall asleep, and it made me so sad that I couldn't do it. 24
hours is a long time.
Like,
when somebody says not get up, do they mean not eat or not even take bathroom breaks?
Yeah, like not stop making sound, I guess, I don't know. I can't speak.
Well, I mean, I guess with the guitar, you can pick it up and go in the bathroom.
If you're naked or something.
I mean, I actually tried that experiment once. I actually went to I was studying hypnosis. And one thing I was trying to do was to try to hypnotize myself to structure bathroom breaks. So if I said I practiced 8 hours, it was 8 hours.
Wow, yeah.
And I actually, one day in my life, actually managed to practice, I don't know how I did it, 14 hours without moving.
Wow.
Now, I mean, I don't know how I did that, but I did do it one day.
That's crazy. Okay.
That's really crazy.
That's amazing.
You had to be really possessed. Like, I don't...
Well, you were probably, like a late teenager or something?
Yeah, I was like about 16 or 17.
Yeah. I mean, that's the time to,
do stuff like that. I mean, I don't know how I did that.
That's crazy.
That is really crazy.
That's a lot.
Right.
Well, okay, last thing with practicing, I guess, would be, are there, like, specific areas where you're like, I'd like to kind of get better at this or go deeper in, like, for example, I want to get better at using space. I don't know, like, I don't know, is there anything like that?
Not at this point, because I think holistically.
Yeah. So
my goal is to get up every day and just be better at who I am.
Yeah.
And I don't know if at this point I mean, I do break things down in components and work on them, but I don't know if I'm thinking, do I want to get better at this?
Okay. Because
the breaking down of components is a matter of trusting the whole process that those components will enter your inwards and manifest as you being better.
Yeah.
And therefore being better at all the parameters of what you're doing. But so I mean, to answer that question, there is still a process of breaking things down and maybe working on particulars, but there's not the thought process behind that I want to get better at this.
It's more just isolate.
It's isolating things, knowing that somehow, I mean, it's like if you're running track and you eat wheat germ,
Yeah.
Back when I was running track as a kid, you were eating.
What'd you say? Eat what?
Wheat germ.
Wheat germ?
Wheat germ, yes.
What the hell is that?
Oh, I mean, just, make your endurance. Whatever. I'm just saying.
Yeah, no.
It's just like it's like I mean, breaking things down more is like taking a supplement.
Yeah. Okay.
If you're and it's just like it's all meant to work together, but you're not. I mean, I guess you are thinking, I want to get better at this and this on a certain level, but again, at this level, your mind's trained well enough to think more in wholes, which is why when we get back to the practice thing, that your practice is more integrated, because the longer you do that, you're thinking more and more in gestalts, and not in isolated instances, things. Even though your instincts allow you to break down things in a way where you can work on particulars, knowing that it's going to feed the organism.
Yeah.
Okay. In a certain way to the benefit of the whole organism.
Okay, gotcha. That makes sense. Okay, one other, I guess. Okay, a couple of quotes from you that I want to ask you to kind of go into detail would be, do you still, this, I think you said this like maybe 20 years ago, but you said something along the lines of like, if I could say everything I ever wanted to say musically in one note or one phrase, that would be my goal in life.
That's still my goal.
Do you feel like, is that like something, but that's kind of like chasing something. Do you feel like it's not actually possible to get that though?
Oh, yes, I do feel it's not actually possible.
Right. It's just something.
Whoa. Oh, first of all, everything's possible. We're within, if we live in an infinity, so it is it's just not possible on the density of the earth.
Okay.
But I do think that like everybody's like, including like the greatest mathematicians ever, or it can all be encapsulated in kind of one point that's dimensionless, that could contain everything. But our human brains are not constructed to be able to deal with that. So that's that's kind of like, if you ask somebody who's a Christian what their aspirations are, and it's to go to heaven. Yeah. Right. That's what.
Gotcha. Okay. I mean, have there been times where you felt like you found it and then you realize, oh no, and then you kind of move on and you realize, oh, that was just I sort of like temporarily unlocked the code, but not actually.
Well, you can't. I mean, okay,
because it's not possible.
The code's not possible to unlock. It's. I mean, in one sense, if it was, why would we have the duration of the human life?
Yeah.
I mean, so it's always something to try to get at that you can never quite get at. Right. And I mean, why would you even get up in the morning if like? But at the same point, like, I can imagine a form of existence that's not based on getting up and having to do a lot of stuff all day too. There's probably some dimension of reality where things just kind of exist, and the activity is something we can't, because like you got to get up, you got to eat, you got to practice, you go to the bathroom, you go answer your email. When I was a kid, you didn't answer your email because there was no email. But in this other kind of energetic realm of activity, we can't, with our brains structured for this reality, we can't even think of what activity or even non-activity is there. So there, as far as in the human realm, that's an aspirational thing, but it's a poetic aspirational metaphor more than an actual, because I also make a living doing this. So if I could convey.
Right, you can't put out a CD with one.
Yeah, I mean, I can't have people give me money for just doing, and I need money to fucking exist. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, maybe I don't. Maybe I'm like, maybe some billionaires be so inspired by what I do, he'll give me money just to live in a cave. Because you need money to live in a cave now. You can't just move to Himalayas. Right. But anyway, I mean, my point being that no, that's a poetic metaphor that's aspirational,
Right.
and is to get at something. But I don't think in the human experience the idea is to ever really get it.
Yeah. It's almost like Sonny Rollins talking about finding like the lost chord or whatever.
Right. Well, Bill Evans talked about that too.
Okay, gotcha.
Um,
So just trying to find like one phrase that's like so it just gets to the essence of everything.
Well, that's the same thing as a physicist trying to get the universal
Yeah,
equation.
yeah.
I guess every physicist. I mean, I don't know. I'm not a physicist, but my assumption is that a physicist wants to come up with an equation that explains every aspect.
Yeah.
And I approach the music that way. I mean, if you want to draw the line between metaphysics and math or being a physicist, I'm actually trying to come up with one phrase that defines or explains everything or gets to the essence of everything.
Right.
That's obviously not going to happen.
Yeah. Right.
And I don't care. I don't think it's going to happen in physics, in math, because I think, every scientist that comes up with something, I'm not going to say it becomes obsolete, but it mutates, so things change and the formulas that explain reality, or I don't even know if it's real. The formulas that explain what we think's reality changes. So, if you're walking around in some dimension and there's things to do, the powers that be that structure things needs to make things to do. So, you can't come to the complete resolution of things, or therefore you might as well just disappear. And,
Okay. Yeah.
which might be cool.
That's well, nowadays, yeah. Okay. Another quote that I think. You said my life has been an attempt at merging the fine line between composition and improvisation and messing with people's perception of them.
Right.
To me, I'm not trying to kiss your ass or something. You do that better than anyone.
Right.
Especially, I mean, if just as an example, like if you take the first track on a lot of your solo piano recordings, like
Right.
say Intrinsic Nature, I've been to many places, stuff like that. Like it's kind of hard to believe that it's improvised just due to the level of focus.
Right.
But also it has all the nutrients of a spontaneous
Right.
improvisation. I mean, how do you, again, I'm not trying to kiss your ass, like are you just so brilliant that you can focus that way? Or I mean, how?
No, I think the second word, I'm so focused
Okay,
that
so
it seems like I'm brilliant.
Okay, so then I mean,
no, because I mean, I think, I think focus, and that's not like I'm concentrating, I mean,
yeah,
but I mean it's just like really setting up a life around doing something and just being utterly dedicated to it. I think that engenders the ability to do something. I mean, I don't, I think that I've been really lucky. I had a lot of really good teachers, and again, like I said earlier, a lot of them are not, a lot of them are people that you would not expect to be able to have some wisdom or,
right.
But I was kind of groomed to do exactly what I do from a very young age, even before I actually knew what it was. And kind of, when I look back, I see people put pieces of the puzzle in place for me, and just little things people said to me early on. When I was like, wow, I mean, and in some cases, they actually predicted exactly my trajectory.
Wow.
And the problems I would have and how I would overcome them. So to answer your question, I do feel that I specifically have some insights into how to play with that area and how to mess with people's minds.
Sure.
Doing that. But I also feel that I've been primed and over a long period of time, I've been primed and really groomed to walk into that role by a whole sort of people, all coming from it from slightly different directions. I mean, I had a mentor in Wilmington, Delaware, and when I mentioned a janitor who was a philosopher, but he also played piano, and he had an intense understanding of, like, say, this is in the 70s. So if you would understand exactly what Monk's focus was as far as kind of being a conduit for a lot of different responses later. And then you understand like Andrew Hill's answer to that. And then if you bring in how Andrew Hill might have been an influence on, say, somebody who doesn't come from that line, like Keith Jarrett, for instance, who doesn't come from that line at all, but Andrew Hill might have influenced a lot of people in the late 70s, late 60s, early, and in the 70s. And especially, like, I mean, you see how Andrew Hill was on Blue Note, Herbie Hancock was on Blue Note. They're two different things altogether.
Yeah.
But there's a continuum of Blue Note artists that are kind of stretching out. And then you consider how someone like Keith Jarrett is a completely different animal. But like Andrew Hill, and I don't know if Keith Jarrett ever listened. I don't know. Yeah. But how that kind of sound world might have. So this guy that I was a mentor to had immense understanding of all of that, and he was imparting this to me, and kind of in a, like I just mentioned things that are completely, I meant Monk, how Andrew Hill comes from Monk, how Andrew Hill influences a Blue Note aesthetic,
right,
where Herbie Hancock might have been kind of playing different than he does on Miles Davis or on his own albums.
Yeah.
But as when he's a sideman, like say he was a sideman on the Sam Rivers album, I know other albums, and then like a different kind of stream of Keith Jarrett, maybe possibly being influenced by some concepts of Hill. Well, this guy that I was a mentor to had a kind of a complete like rounded ability to kind of understand all of this, and was imparting all this to me at a really young age when I didn't really have a grasp. To me it was just like I'm a young kid and I'm just seeing all this, and it's like I'm trying to figure out what it is. And it's on one level I felt all of it, but on another level it was all above me too. I felt it, and that's all you can ask anybody to do. I guess you can't. Who wants to understand it? You want to feel it, and but anyway, he really and he kind of brought me. He always like said to me that you're going to enter into this one day, and you're going to have your own avenue through all this, and he and other people really groomed me. So there's a lot of things that went on in the 70s. For instance, with solo piano, since you mentioned that, when I think of the 70s and solo piano, both, Cecil Taylor was doing the albums that he's really known for, Silent Tongues,
right.
Air Above Mountains, Indent, 3 really masterpiece solo piano albums. And then Keith Jarrett was doing all, a lot of his solo. And I'm not really a Keith Jarrett.
We won't go there.
Okay, I guess it's.
You can if you want.
No, I know. It's public knowledge. I wrote an essay
Right,
on it.
I know.
I'm not the biggest Keith Jarrett fan. Even though I do recognize his brilliance.
Yeah.
I'm just come from a whole philosophically different aspect of it, and I don't. But anyway, But he was doing his concerts that he's known for. The obvious album that sold. I'm not going to even say the name of it because I don't. But that sold a lot of massive amount of copies.
Yes.
Was a '70s phenomenon, and so I was seeing all that,
right,
and trying to make sense of it all, because those are two different approaches to solo piano, and they're polar opposites.
Yeah, totally.
But they both enter kind of into the realm of the archetype of the spontaneous composer, improviser, and both of them have personas that kind of present that archetype. But from such because Cecil Taylor was very insistent on trying to make people realize that he was coming out of the jazz continuum. That even if you saw him as some type of freak,
right,
that he wanted you to know that he's coming out of Monk, he's coming out of Horace Silver,
Ellington.
He's coming out of Ellington, and it's not just like he's not just sitting here
Yeah.
banging. It comes out of a methodology that is a jazz methodology. And Jarrett was not. I mean, he was writing, talking philosophical stuff, but it was. I mean, I don't know if he ever articulated of what he was coming at, but what I got out of it was, he was a really skilled jazz player who had a classical background, who just tried to play. So there wasn't when he did his solo concert. So with Taylor doing it, he was trying to say that okay, I'm improvising, but there's a methodology behind what I'm doing that's as austere as Monk's methodology or whatever. I didn't get the sense that Keith Jarrett was trying to, and I don't want to use the word justify, but I guess justify his solo concerts. He was just trying to say, I'm emptying my mind and this what comes out. Now, to me, it was, I felt like, he's a skilled jazz player who has a classical background, and I was not really a fan of it because I was kind of looking for, how could I put this? I was looking for the synthesis that third stream music maybe never really gave. And if somebody hears this, third stream music was a movement in jazz kind of credited to Gunther Schuller, a composer and a conductor, and it was the actual conscious attempt to merge jazz and classical. I just, to me, I didn't get the synthesis. I mean,
Well, also there isn't an attempt to be like you're very succinct in your at least recorded attempts at playing solo. Not in gigs, you're more just kind of like play for an hour. That's different. But I mean, Keith is like the total opposite of that in the way he plays solo.
Right.
So,
I always felt that I always felt Richie Byrick, and when I was young, they seemed to be trying to market him as like a new Keith Jarrett, and I don't think the marketing worked. But I always felt his solo playing that I heard was much. I mean, I've heard aspects of Richie Byrick where, within one measure, I heard a completely complete synthesis of like Bill Evans and Schoenberg, but it wasn't intended that way. That's just what came out.
Totally. Yeah.
And it was like completely unpretentious, and it was just what came out at the second, and it was just like stunning, like so I've heard like kind of a jazz Charles Ives come out of him in some small in certain improvisations at times, which was not it was not. He was not trying to do that. It was just completely a part of the moment and came out. So I always don't get me wrong. Keith Jarrett's brilliant, and he has his audience, but as I was saying, what I was searching for back then, that was the beginning of the new age market too, because that was around the time like Windham Hill Records came out, and I'm not saying Keith Jarrett's a part of that, but it's a part of the same zeitgeist. And it was definitely a commercial. There was an audience prime for that, being that he had played with Charles Lloyd when that album that sold 1 million or whatever,
Forest Flower.
So there was especially like a West Coast audience, kind of post hippies. I don't know that were, and then the new age market came with Windham Hill, so it was primed for that. But if you're going to catch that audience, how deep can you go? In a certain level.
I get what you're saying.
And I'm being, I'm not trying to be nasty.
No, it's
really
a different motivation.
I don't even know motive. I mean, it's part of the time,
Yeah. Okay. I get what you're saying.
So, but getting back to what you said at the 70s, all that solo piano stuff was really there in my head. It was just around, and I was trying to make sense of all that, and I didn't ever really envision myself playing solo. It's kind of funny that that's where I do most in some ways, because I was scared. I mean, first of all, there's as a jazz pianist, when there's the unbelievable kind of historical specter of just Art Tatum.
Yeah, sure.
Having done solo. Right. So I mean, whatever you do, and that's kind of stupid because because in one sense, when you say that, you got this Euro model in your head of what is impressive to certain people. And this is, Tatum is great. I mean, I'm not saying anything. I'm talking about people's perceptions of how they deal with it.
Yeah.
So, like, you know, I mean, as great as Art Tatum's solo album can be, you know, if Barry Manilow sits down tomorrow and plays, you know, 8 bars of solo and he really feels it, it's as valuable.
Yeah,
you know, I mean,
yeah.
so like just to have that in what I said, even though I said that, to have that in your mind is worthless because you know, I mean, just because like in an academic way, Tatum's looked at a certain way doesn't negate anything. But I'm just saying that as a jazz, you're indoctrinated kind of with that, so you don't really know what you can do solo. I mean, I just, you know, like Bill Evans never really did so. I mean, Bud Powell did very little solo, and actually some of my favorite Bud Powell are
amazing.
like are the solo cuts, but he did very little of it, right? You know, there's not really, even though because of the nature of the piano in classical music, solo piano is a big deal.
Right.
You still don't get that many jazz pianists mind the solo thing. So I never really thought of myself as doing that, even though because of the 70s thing that I talked about, you know, it was a big part of my head. I just felt I could never really get there. And as arrogant as I come off in some of my interviews, believe it, I'm actually not as arrogant as I. But anyway, but until I did Before the World, which was my first solo album that I recorded, it came out after another one, Symbol Systems came out. But until I did that, I had never planned to do solo, and it was Jos Gervers from FMP that called me and asked me to do that solo concert and said he wanted to record it, and I was just like, I'm not ready. And this is in the 90s, you know. And he's like, yes, you are. And I'm like, I'm not. He goes, I think you're ready. I've been doing this for a long. So then I just decided that maybe that was the powers that be letting me know that I might be ready.
Okay. Yeah.
And I decided, and you know, then my confidence actually rose that I might have something to say in a solo format. And I've since, you know, done it so much that I'm maybe overconfident.
Don't be overconfident. Okay, well, I mean, I don't want to go too into detail with that, but okay, just to go back to one for a second. What advice would you give someone who wants to achieve that level of focus that you have when improvising in a way that can be so succinct and compositional while still feeling so improvisational, if that makes sense?
Well, they got to have the what you just said is a desire, so they got to have that desire to do that, exactly that.
Yeah.
That's what. So from there, it's a matter of finding practice techniques that allow you to do that.
Do you feel like it's easier on the piano because it lends itself to solo playing more than, say, like guitar?
Probably.
Okay.
Probably.
Good. That makes me feel better.
Right. Okay. I would say probably because there's more of a. But when there's less of a historical analogy, that gives you an open field to also come up with some. Because the great thing about the piano in that regard is there's a lot of models, but the bad thing about that is there's a lot of models.
Right. I think just the fact that even just you can have two things going at once makes it easier. Just that basic.
I guess, but if the will was there and that much, then you would create whatever you need to create.
Sure. Yeah, I got you.
Right.
Okay, so, well, we already talked about practicing, but is composition some sort of? Does composition play a role in your day? Like I think about Roscoe saying how you have to study improvisation and composition as parallels.
Did he say that?
Yeah. That's his whole thing when teaching, or one of his.
Right. I played with Roscoe for years, so I don't remember him actually saying that.
Right.
But we in rehearsals we were already dealing with his.
Yeah.
So he wasn't. What did you go to a workshop of his? Or?
No, just something he talks about that a lot in interviews. How his biggest advice to students is to study composition and improvisation as parallels. That he always says that as one of his main things. Like, don't follow.
Well, that's his main thing in the rehearsals.
Right. Yeah.
Don't follow.
Right. So.
Wow. I never thought about that because.
Is that just like embedded into your thinking anyway? I mean, is it hard to
kind of? I mean, I think in Gestalt.
Yeah.
So that's a sort of, that's a bifurcation that
right.
You acknowledge two aspects of one whole, and then I guess both of them are similar in the fact that the idea is a product of music at the end of the day, but you go about them in slightly different ways. One is a discipline of taking a pen to a piece of paper, and another is a discipline of actually just sweating and making patterns with your body and in your brain in real time. So the goal is to have a musical product to present, but the society defines the two things slightly different. I understand what he's saying. I agree that there's value to that. Again, with anybody, because teachers or if you ask, if somebody says this is how to go, I never know. Like, for instance, I know teachers that say, this is how you learn. And my question was always, did Charlie Parker learn that way?
Right.
And I knew the answer was no.
Yeah.
I knew that. So, I understand what he's saying, and I kind of agree. I agree.
Yeah.
And I see within his musical framework, because I know his music pretty well. I don't know all his albums that well, but I played with him for years and years, and I certain albums I knew really well. Right. There's record collectors that know everything.
Sure.
I'm not that person.
Right. He's probably. I don't know if he would be saying those things if he wasn't a teacher. Also,
right.
He's probably just trying to help his students think a certain way or something.
Well, he has composition students, and then he has jazz students, that play. So I can imagine, and this I don't want to put thoughts in his mind or words in his mouth. I can imagine that there's a possibility that he's come up with kind of a format of teaching that caters to all of them.
Yeah.
And then within a private lesson, he probably gets more specific with whatever. I'm just
sure. No,
this is conjecture. I don't.
Mm-hmm.
But I do understand what he's saying. Now, he is obviously known as sax player and an improviser, but he does actually do thoroughly composed pieces and goes after performances of them.
Right.
So he functions. Part of the way he functions in the world is doing that and bifurcating that.
Right.
In a way, there's pieces that bring that together, but there's also, he does that and he does this.
Right.
And I don't know if that advice comes from the fact that that's how he structures his life, or if he's trying to give an overall musical continuum type of.
Could be,
Yeah. So, but it doesn't hurt in your learning stages to learn everything.
Sure,
it doesn't hurt.
Right. You learning classical pieces could be your version of that.
Right. At the same time, I have met people that have how can I put this? Musical constipation from too much information.
Right. Yeah.
And
totally.
And they never figured out how to digest it or excrete what is not necessary for the organism. Right. So, but all of that, there's no explanation for how to proceed with that. That's just a matter of absorbing, excreting, and digestion. Right.
Okay, I got you. All right. When going to solo piano gigs of yours, I've mostly just been struck by the vibrational aspect of the sound, and that's what I really love about the experience.
Right.
And I think, I mean, the sort of vibrational aspect of the sound, would you consider that possibly the main motivating force behind your approach to language? Or
I would tend to think, and I don't know if this is a direct quote. Did Miles Davis say something about the fact that the sound is the found, and then from there?
I think it was Louis Armstrong.
Okay, somebody said.
I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, I would tend to think that there probably that the basic vibration is the genesis of it all, and then the actual musical parameters come after that.
Mm-hmm.
I would also tend to think probably that the basic vibration, if you are communicating a personality or any individuality, that comes from the vibration more than the I mean, there's only fucking 12 notes. What the fuck? Yeah, I mean, well, so only so many chords and notes, so like it's nobody's gonna discover the secret note.
Yeah. Right.
So I would tend to think that that's probably the organizational genesis behind the other parameters, and also what gives the juice and the personality.
Yeah.
So I would assume that you're correct in that, and I would also, in Clifford Allen's book about my Road Lord albums, which the book is a really beautiful book. He talks about how I'm a shapeshifter at the piano. So I'm trying to I'm actually trying to just make it an extension of my brain and my mind,
right.
Not the brain, but the actual field of the mind. And I'm trying to really shape shift it from a piano to a kind of cosmic computer, or computer's not the word.
Spaceship or something.
Yeah, because I grew up before computers, and computers get on my nerves. But I'm trying to some type of so it is about that, whatever that cosmic vibration, that whatever I've tapped into, that is what the sound is, and what the information is.
Okay.
Or the information comes from that.
And then if you're successful on any given night, say successful meaning you're happy with that aspect of the playing.
Right.
I mean, how much of it, and I get that this can be hard to separate, but like how much of it is your mind, your technique, the piano itself, the room itself? I mean, if you're really into what's happening.
Right. Well, everything's a mental experience. I mean, let's just start from that. I don't think, I don't see, I mean, you said the piano, I mean,
because I know you you care whether the piano, I mean, you prefer a great piano, obviously.
I think most pianists do.
Okay, yeah, sure. Yeah.
I mean, I can't speak for everybody, but a really good instrument helps.
Yeah.
And a really shitty one does not help.
Right.
Okay, so what's the question? How much is in my mind, or how much is?
Yeah, I mean, like, how much of it comes from a sound that's inside your head? How much of it comes from your years of your hands being on, like, a more physical aspect of it, and then how much of it is the instrument itself? I know it's probably super hard to. I mean, I don't want exact percentages. But,
well, you're not going to.
But you know what I mean.
Yeah,
like,
you're not going to get exact percentages. Well, I mean, who's to break down reality and say, from a higher perspective, it's there is no breakdown and all that. It's all kind of one thing. But I mean, we're obviously not in the higher perspective. We're dealing here. So there's there is a continuum. There's a between all of that. I mean, you know, I like to say, fuck the audience. You know, I do what I do. I mean, I love my audience.
No,
I don't mean, but I mean, I'm just centered in the act of making music, and the people don't enter into the equation, or they actually do. You know, even though I say they do.
But I get what you're saying.
I mean, because the atmosphere, you know, if it's one of hostility, that's not really fun, you know?
Right.
And if you're being appreciated and accepted, and the people want what you have, that helps prod you along. I mean, you know, granted, I'm focused, I'm concentrated, I'm into the zone, but like if you were in a hostile environment, you know, that would not help. It just wouldn't. I mean, unless you really, I mean, I'm a very concentrated person, and I can block out stuff.
Yeah.
But to be in it, like if I was in the middle of, like, say, a hardcore people that hate jazz and hate, and they're sitting there watching you and you're playing, and you know, I had to. I mean, I guess in that situation you could go so into your zone because you know that it might actually be helpful, but
like no day. Yeah, right.
But you know, I don't like what
I was gonna say like No Nea, like Roscoe in the where he gets booed at the when he does No Nea.
There's an album where he gets booed.
Yeah, like the one from what is it, 76 or something?
What, in the Nessa album?
I don't know. This story is Braxton was supposed to play solo. He couldn't make it. Roscoe went out, and he started playing just that one phrase. And they were booing him, and he just kept doing it, and eventually they were like, "Oh my god, this is the greatest thing ever."
I didn't know that story. But anyway, I think. Well, I'm going to go back to everything's mental. So
okay,
that's because if an audience is unresponsive, I could mentally choose not to react to that or whatever, you know. The instrument, I mean, it's mental because I could overcome the, you know, if I really wanted to and the instrument really fucking sucks, I could overcome it somehow. You know, it's in me to overcome.
To Monk. I mean,
right.
Yeah.
It's in me to overcome. I mean, I did a concert at Baraka's apartment once. I did a duo with William Parker where I think I was playing on a kid's little instrument, you know.
Yeah.
But, you know, made it work.
Right.
Yeah, so I don't remember exactly. It was like, I remember notes flying off, and it was like not a full. This was back in the.
You mean like a little digital keyboard? Or?
I don't remember. This is in the early 90s.
Okay.
It might have even been the late 80s.
Gotcha.
But William and I ended up over at Baraka's apartment doing a thing, or his house in Jersey playing, and it was not a. Like, you know, I wouldn't even have like a 5-year-old doing their preliminary exercises on. But anyway, to make a long story, it was not a good piano.
Yeah, I got you. Right.
But I mean, it's all mental on one level. You know, I don't know. I mean, I don't really. When a performance is over, it's over. I don't go back and analyze. I mean, I used to, but right now I know I can do my thing. So, like, if something is off, I just chalk it up to something being off that night.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay, and then I mean, related to that, I love that that distinction you make between like the Monk versus Paul Bley approach to the piano, of like Monk being like asserting your thing to any piano, and then Bley being trying to like read into the personality of a piano.
Right.
I mean, do you feel like you're?
I try to bridge both. I try to that brings up an interesting point because you never think of a convergence. Like if you could take the subconscious mind of Monk and Paul Bley and merge them,
right?
Never, and that would be pretty awesome.
I mean, you are kind of in between the two. That's how I would think of your approach to the piano. I mean, leaning maybe more towards Monk, but also, well, is that what Clifford Allen meant when he says you're kind of a shapeshifter, like towards more of the Bley side of the approach?
We got to ask Clifford.
Okay.
Okay. I've made that distinction in a couple articles or a couple interviews.
It's just very insightful.
Well, I think to me, like, Monk's talent was he had that sound deep inside of him, and he could superimpose that on any piano. He says that, and I have talked about whether the piano is a Steinway grand or some little upright. He can project the same sound, and you don't really sit around thinking about it if you're listening to him on it.
Yeah.
Whereas Paul Bley, I've always thought of as somebody he can sit at a piano and within 30 seconds he can suss out what that piano can do, and then he can enter into the personality of that piano and then generate a sound world that's based on that.
Right.
Because if you listen to different Paul Bley albums in different periods, I mean, he sounds like a completely
so different. Yeah.
Like I mean, it's just like
it's amazing. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, he has a complete and utter ability in that realm that nobody has.
So
you know,
yeah.
And then Monk probably to me has the deepest ability of somebody that can sit at any piano and just foster that inner thing of his to that instrument. But it's different. It kind of gets metaphysically to the same thing, but it's two whole different approaches that are divergent in the genesis of how they happen and the basic philosophical imprint behind them. But but they both yield a very strikingly brilliant way of living in the world.
Absolutely.
A lot of stuff we're talking about themes I hit on in my book called Black Mystery School Pianist and Other Writing on Auto No Media, and there's things we've talked about here that are not talked about in the book. I mean, I have an essay on Dennis Sandoli in there, but I don't really talk about practicing per se, and we've talked a lot about that here. And but I've actually tried to doing this interview knowing that it's going to be posted around similar time to the book coming out.
Right.
I've hit on some of the themes, but going a different direction. So I really would suggest people, if they're interested in what makes me tick or what my ideas are about both modern jazz and being an artist in general, that you read that book that's published by Auto No Media by me, called Black Mystery School Pianist and Other Writing.